conversation about the classless networks, let me to give you two examples for better understanding the inefficiency of the classful network. Why the classful networks, or why the rules of the IP address classes is not so efficient. It is inefficient. Why? Let me to show you. Assume that this is the first example. We have two examples here. We have a network with 300 clients. Choose IP address means please choose one class of IP address. You know that in class A, okay, in each network we have this amount of IP address. I showed you that 2 to the power of 24 minus 2 equal to this value, okay? And if we are using one class for A networks, we will waste this amount of for example, IP address. Look at here, we need only 300 clients. When you have this huge number of usable IP address and using one of the class A networks, you will waste this amount of, for example, IP address, and this is not a good choice. If you use class B networks, in class B, in every network, we have this amount of IP address, 65,534. Okay, this means that we need only 300, and because of that, again, you will waste this amount of number of the addresses. If you use class C, you don't have a sufficient IP address in one class C because we need 300 clients. Because of that, if we use class A and class B, we are wasting many IP address. And we can't use also the class C because the class C only has this amount of 254 IP address. Because of that, here we have a problem. The problem is that when you are using class A or class B networks, you will waste many IP addresses, and this is not good. We have shortage of IPv4 address, you know it, okay? And also we can't use the class C. The reason is that we have only three choices. Let me to give you to review these three choices. If you are using the class, okay, if you are using the class A network, you will have this amount of IP address in every network, and this is so a huge number, and this is more than IP address we need. If you are using class B, okay, IP address, you will have this amount, 65,000 IP address, okay? And again, this is so huge a number, and we don't need this amount of IP address in one networks. Also, if you are using the class C, you have only 254 IP address, and maybe this is not sufficient for each network. Here we have only three choices. We don't have another choice. For example, we can't assign a 350 address. Okay, we have only these three choices, and this is the shortage of the IPv4 address classes rules. Okay, look at here. This is the second problem, or this is the second example. We have a network with only 20 clients. Choose which IP address is good for us. Look at here. If we use class A, you know that we need to wait. We should wait many IP address, and this is not a good choice. If we use class B, again, we should, for example, waste many IP address. And also, if you use class C also, again, you use 20 IP address from one class C, and also you will waste many IP address. Again, here we have the same problem. The problem is that the classful networks are not efficient method for addressing. We are using the new and also better and a more efficient method of the addressing of the IP addressing. We call it classless IP addressing and classless networks. In classless networks, we don't have the rules of the IP address classes. You will learn about it in this course, but let me to say that in classful networks, we have limitation to choose only class A, class B, and class C. Means respectively 24 bits for host, 16 bits for host, and 8 bit for host, and it is not a good choice. We are using the classless networks rules in our networks. I will show you how you can use these rules and what is the classless network. But until now, we can understand what is the shortage, what is the inefficiency of the classful networks or the IP address classes rules. Now we can better understand the rules that we call them classless IP addressing, or some concepts such as the subnet mask or some other topics in the newest method of the addressing of the IP addressing. We call it classless network. Now we can talk about the classless networks. What is the difference between the classless networks and classful networks? In classless networks, we don't use the concept of the IP address classes. You know that when I wanted to show you the concept of class, I used one example. Let me to review that example. I said that we have one PC, for example, with one IP address 192.168.1.1 and PC1, and also the PC2's IP address is 192.168. For example, 2.1, okay, or an IP address such as this IP address. The IP address is not important, the concept is important, okay. I use this example for understanding the function of the IP address classes. The question is that when PC1 needs to send traffic to the PC2, okay, it should send traffic directly or it should send traffic with help of the router, okay. You know that when the PC1 and PC2 are residing in one network, they can communicate directly. But when PC1 and PC2 are residing in two networks or different networks, they need their router to forward traffic between them. You know it, okay? For example, now in classful networks, let me to give to use the classful network addressing, classful rules. Here in classful network, we have the rules of the classes. For example, we know that the IP address of the PC1 in class C, and because this is in class C, the network address, okay, let me to write here, the network address is 192.168.1.0. In the host bits, I used all of the bits at 0 because of that this is a network address. The PC1, when needs to decide that how it can forward the traffic to the PC2, it can compare the network ID of the destination IP or the PC2 with its network ID. Here, as you can see, the network ID of the PC2's IP address is 192.168.2, and this is different with the, for example, network address of the PC1. Because of that, PC1 can understand that the PC2 is residing in another network. Because of that, PC1 can send the this traffic to the router, okay? And also the router can send the traffic to the destination PC2. The router is the default gateway. This is the default gateway or gateway of the, for example, PC1, and it can forward the traffic to the PC2. This is the function of the IP address classes. With IP address classes, we can, for example, identify the network address and also host address in one IP address, and also we can use this network address to compare with the destination IP network address. Finally, we can decide that we can send the traffic directly to the destination or we need to send the traffic to the default gateway. This is the function of the IP address classes, and I'm sure that you'll learn about this, and here we don't have any problem. But now I'm going to say that the classful rules or the IP address classes rules is not efficient. You know it. I showed you two examples, and you know that the IP address classes rule is inefficient. How we can solve it? The solution is using the classless networks. In classless networks, as you will learn, we don't have the limitation of the classful networks. This means that we don't have only 3 options for class A, class B, and class C, and as you see, we don't experience the problems that we experience in the classful networks. I will talk about that, but for now, let me to say that in classless networks, we don't for example, have the IP address classes rules. Let me write here, no IP address classes rules. Okay, this is good. But the question is that now how the PC1 can understand the PC2 is residing in the PC1 network or is not residing in the PC1 network. Again, we have a question now and we need to answer it. Okay, because here you know that in classless networks means we don't have the IP address classes rules. How PC1 can identify that PC2 is residing in its networks, and if it's residing in its networks it can forward traffic directly to PC2, or the PC2 residing in another network and PC1 can use, for example, the router or default gateway to send traffic to the PC2. This is the question. We need to answer or solve this problem. Okay, here we have again the problem because we don't have the class IP address classes rules. We are using a new feature in the classless networks. We call it subnet mask. I'm sure you heard about the subnet mask, but in this part of, for example, course, I'm going to talk about with detail about the subnet mask. What is the subnet mask? What is the usage of the subnet mask? Don't forget, this is so important for us for learning the subnet mask completely and efficiently, because you will use the subnet mask in all of the scenarios in this course. You will use subnet mask beside of the IP address in all of the scenarios in this course. Because of that, it's so important to understanding the subnet mask efficiently. What is the function of subnet mask? The function of subnet mask is identifying the network part and also the host part. This is the maybe this is one of the easiest definition that we can give to subnet mask. With subnet mask we can find the network part of one IP address and also host part of IP address. You know that before that subnet mask we use the IP address classes rules for identifying the network part of IP address and also host part of IP address. Now we are using the subnet mask. But how? Let me to talk about that. Look at here. You know that about the IP address. Okay, let me to review the IP address. You know that in IP address we have 32 bit. Okay, 1 2 3 4